Hello, a very warm welcome to HOWA's Virtual Caravan class on No Fridge Nomad. There will be a 30-minute talk from our presenter and 30 minutes for questions and answers. The chat will open up at 9:25 for you to submit your questions on the topic of No Fridge Nomad. Once the class ends at 10, the chat feature will remain open for an additional 15 minutes to continue interaction with the presenter. This morning, we have an amazing speaker who lived and thrived in her cargo van for 2 years. For most of those 2 years, she lived without a refrigerator. In this class, she is going to share what she has learned about planning your food purchases and how to store it. But most of all, you will see why it works for her, so you can see if it will work for you as well. Please welcome HOWA's Executive Assistant, Phyllis Bickford.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, it's good to see you. I know there's a lot of people out there that I see in the virtual campfires and the virtual coffees. So thank you all for being here this morning. So, yep, I'm one of those living without a fridge on the road, and you can too if it works for you. The reason I chose to go without the refrigerator is because of space. I mean, I know I'm in a cargo van, which is fairly large, but all in all, I had other things I wanted to store instead of a refrigerator that I wasn't using. I got the refrigerator when I went on the road and used it for about a week and found it wasn't really all that useful for me. And then it became a very inefficient tote for me because I would keep things in there but not have the refrigerator turned on. The other reason why I didn't like it is that when I first started out, I was in the Pacific Northwest and in the forest, and I was chasing sunlight all the time for my solar. So I was always concerned I wouldn't be able to keep my other items like my laptop charged. And I thought, well, the refrigerator's got to go. So out went the refrigerator. I did, since then, I've removed the refrigerator from my rig, and I do have storage now for other things. So that was my motivation. I never thought it was something I would do. But the reasons I think it works for me is because I do follow the weather, and I'm very rarely over 80 degrees. Occasionally it happens, but for the most part, not. So number one, and very, very important, is that I follow the weather. I'm also willing to think for myself about things. So even though social norms may say that you need to refrigerate this or that or your ketchup or mustard, I don't necessarily believe that. I'm willing to think about, gee, does it work for me? Why do we keep it cold? Do other people really keep it cold? And having traveled a bit out of the country, I see that many, many other societies don't refrigerate things we do. So I was willing to think outside of the box compared to what our society says we need to do. And I'm fine also. The other part of it is I'm fine with not always having a cold drink. You know, maybe you've all heard about the Germans drink warm beer. Well, I don't drink beer that much, but I am okay with room temperature milk, for instance, or I'm okay with room temperature juice. My yogurt doesn't have to be cold. I'm okay with that. So that's another consideration for you. If you have to have a nice cold soda or something, or cold crisp apple, maybe this doesn't work for you. But I'm okay with it. In preparation for today, I went out to the YouTube University and checked, and there are quite a few other videos on non-fridge living. So I encourage you to go check them out. I learned a couple of things that I'm going to be incorporating since I've watched those other videos. I also Googled it, and I was so surprised to see that Google really promotes standard thinking about refrigeration. You must refrigerate this, you must refrigerate that. Now, that all being said, I realize that there are certain foods that if you don't refrigerate, they're going to be losing nutrients more quickly than if you do refrigerate them. And that's an important consideration that I'm willing to live with. So for you, you're going to have to make your mind up about that yourself. I also saw on these videos that many people who don't have refrigerators also do not have stoves. They don't have ovens. They have no way of cooking. So they are truly, truly having to figure out ways to sustain themselves without, not just without refrigeration, but also without heat and cooking. I do have a stove. I don't have a barbecue. I don't have a microwave, and I don't have an oven. So that does frame what kinds of foods I do buy. And that'll change what you buy too, for you and your rig. I'm not going to talk too much about foods that we typically don't refrigerate, that we all know we don't refrigerate. We don't refrigerate cereal or granola bars, or unless you're trying to keep ants out of them. You know, that's the one reason people refrigerate things too, is to keep bugs out. I haven't run into that on the road, so it's not an issue for me. But things like rice and canned goods, we're not going to talk so much about that because that's a given. We all know about that. But let's talk about some of the things that people think that we must refrigerate. For instance, what would be the very first thing everybody says? Mayonnaise, eggs, right? Well, let me show you some of the things, the very common things. I'm sorry if I'm making you seasick here, but I'm going to take you over to this counter and show you that these are some things that people think you need to refrigerate and that I don't. And mostly they are the condiments. So you can see here we've got mustards, we've got salad dressings, and there's the mayonnaise. Now I want you to notice that that mayonnaise is not in a jar. It comes in a squeeze bottle. There's never anything that goes into that jar. That's only, it gets, the mayonnaise gets squeezed into the tuna fish or squeezed into whatever I'm on a sandwich, and then it gets sealed up again and gets put up on the shelf. So that's really important. It stays uncontaminated. I'm going to tell you too that once you put mayonnaise out of that bottle into some tuna fish or onto a sandwich, it has limited shelf life. It needs to be eaten right away. Do not keep that hanging around. All right, let me see what else is over here. Of course, peanut butter. I don't keep that in the refrigerator. I don't think most people do, but most people will keep pickles in the refrigerator. I don't. And I don't keep olives in the refrigerator. And I don't keep my soy sauce in a refrigerator. Jam, honey. Honey is best not kept in a refrigerator anyway. It has a tendency to crystallize. But the jam, you know, I struggled with that one. And I watch it carefully. And if I were ever to see any mold at all forming on it, I don't keep it. But I haven't. I've had this on my shelf for at least 2 months, and it's half gone. And I have taken clean spoons and put it into it and pulled the jam out, and I have been fine with it. Just like your refrigerator food, I check it all the time. I don't just assume it's good without looking at it. So those are some of the things that we think we have to have in refrigerators, but we don't. Let's see. Let's move on to the next thing, bread. Okay. I don't eat a lot of bread, partly because I don't want to carry it and worry about it getting squashed. But I do eat tortillas. And one thing that I just recently found that I really like are non-rounds. Not going to get squashed. And I can use it for sandwiches. I can use it for dipping like a cracker. I can use it for a lot of things. So, and it seems to last really a long time. Now, these tortillas that you're looking at, I've had in my rig for 3 weeks. And I still have a couple left. They're flour tortillas and they're fine. That's how I go through on my bread. Now, I do love ciabattas and I do love sandwiches. So I do, when I go to the store, I'll buy a bag of those. And because they're relatively hard, they don't get squashed, and they'll be gone in a matter of maybe 3 or 4 days. I don't let them linger around on my shelves. All right, let's move on to fruit. These are fairly very uncontroversial foods, but if we get over to fruit, okay, you see here I've got apples. I do not refrigerate my apples. Grapefruits last wonderfully, 2 to 3 weeks. Apples, easily 3 weeks. Avocados, you got to watch them. You know how that goes. When they start to get soft, they need to be eaten up right away. No different than you would be at home, but I do not refrigerate them. Now, peaches. Peaches are an interesting thing. I very seldom buy them, but I thought they would be a good thing to talk about today, because with the peaches, you see, they don't travel well. You've got to eat them soon. I mean, if you're going to be actually on the road, you know they're going to get bumped around in your rig. And that's not good, because they end up bruised and then they get bad even more quickly. So I only bought 2 peaches, and these will get eaten in the next couple of days, and they'll certainly get eaten before I go on the road or move locations. And so you see, I'm starting to think, and I want you to start thinking about the fact that you need to plan your foods, what you're going to eat first. And not only what you're going to eat first, but how much of the foods that you buy must you eat first? Because you can overload yourself with foods that, oh, I want this, I want that, I want this, when you're in the market. And then you get home and you find out, oh my gosh, I have a feast here that I would have, it's going to take me a week to eat it all. Well, now you've defeated the whole purpose. So you have to be careful when you're shopping that you limit and think about the meals that you've got set up in your mind that you're going to eat first, that you're not going to over buy food for that. Let's move on to the vegetables. When we go on to vegetables, you see onions, most people know to keep them dry and in an airy place. Can you see that onion? There it is. Carrots, potatoes, the same sort of thing. So many people wouldn't refrigerate potatoes or onions. They may refrigerate carrots. I don't, but I do keep them in a bag, in a plastic bag, so that they I don't know, I think they stay less, they don't go rubbery as quickly. Potatoes, you can see back there the red pepper. Red pepper, I have bought red peppers before in my life. I haven't usually bought them without refrigeration, but I know that what I'm going to do is keep it in a plastic bag so it doesn't dry out and get shrivelly so quickly. I like them because I like to eat them with tuna fish instead of bread or crackers. And mushrooms, oh, that's a delicacy. And it will be gone in 2 days. It's not going to last. I do take the plastic wrap off, and I will wrap the box in paper towels and keep it in a cool, as dry of a place as I can. Lettuce. Oh, I'm so glad to talk to you about lettuce. One of the people I met on the road talked to me about this lettuce, which I hadn't always seen in the market, but never thought of as a option for me. But I don't know if you can see that, but there's the roots that are in dirt right there in that thing of lettuce. And I'm thinking that instead of going bad in 2 or 3 days, that's going to last me maybe 5 days. So it's kind of an experiment for me today. We'll see how it goes along. I often buy lettuce in these pre-made salad packagings, and that'll last me 3 days. But I've got a hint for you that I'm going to tell you about a little bit later on in the talk this morning. And of course, don't forget that you can drink vegetable juice as well. There's some V8 juice. Now, I happen to love asparagus and Brussels sprouts, and that's why I buy the mushrooms, because I love to have that bundle of asparagus will make 2 meals for me. I will make a big frying pan of it, fried in butter with a little bit of soy sauce and mushrooms. Very satisfying, meatless meal. And the same thing for this Brussels sprouts. I understand that's not for everybody, but I like it. And I can count on the asparagus and Brussels sprouts lasting as much as a week. So that gives me more, if I get my salads in first part of the week, and then I can go to my other greens. So that's pushing my fresh fruits and vegetables out there for a week. Now, the other controversial item is dairy. So you can see I've got eggs. Well, we all know that there are quite a few of us out here that have eggs in our rig and we don't refrigerate them. So that's not quite so much of a surprise. But I also use cheese. I grew up in Wisconsin and I'm a cheese head. So here I am with my Oregon cheese, Tillamook. And that's a 2-pound block. Now that 2-pound block will last me up to 3 weeks. And it's fine. I keep it in a bag. If I see any little mold growing on it, I pare it off and get rid of it and put it in a new bag and keep it again. I find it works out very well for me. If I get over 80 degrees in temperature, outside temperature, now I'm running into little problems because it has a tendency to have the oil come to the surface. I don't worry about it. It's still edible. It's still good for me, and I go ahead and eat it anyway. Boy, when you're pushing it for many days over 85, you're really pushing your luck, though. So I buy smaller quantities of it. Then I don't buy 2 pounds. I buy an 8-ounce block. And of course, the sliced cheese. There you can see the Munster. That's another good option that I have. I often get sliced cheese, or my dear sweet sister visited me and she brought string cheese. So there's a call out to my sister. But then you see up here, oh my gosh, what do we have here? That's yogurt. That's some Noosa yogurt. And I have learned, because I love yogurt, that I can buy yogurt, and as long as it's sealed, you know it's got a foil seal inside, that will last. I've had it last as long as 3 weeks without refrigeration. And I don't know if it would last longer because I've eaten it before then. But whoever would have thought that you could have yogurt that wasn't refrigerated. And I do like milk as well. Occasionally I like it in my milk, or in my coffee or in my cereal. And I found that this Horizon milk, which comes in 12, let's see, they're in, I think, 8-ounce. Yeah, 8-ounce cartons. There's 12 of them in there. I keep that on my shelf. It's always around. And whenever I would either like to have some milk and cookies or put it in my coffee, I've got milk around. So that's the thing about dairy. You know, it kind of blows a lot of our thoughts out of the water about what you can have and what you can't have in your rig. Let's see, let me check my notes here. Oh, okay, meat. You know, meat's a thing, and you can do a lot of things with meat that are canned. There's the infamous Spam, tuna fish, and you've probably seen canned chicken on the shelves over by Tuna. And one day I was in there just recently and thought there wasn't much tuna on the shelf. And I saw salmon, and I thought, oh, I remember eating salmon out of a can when I was a kid. And my mom used to make it into salmon patties. Or if it was really warm outside, she would just spread it out onto a serving platter and people would use that and eat it just plain. So I'm looking forward to being able to use the salmon in that way. Roast beef, I gotta say, I bought the cans of roast beef. I've tried one. It's relatively tasteless unless you mix it with some other things just to give it some flavor. It's tender, it's moist, but it's pretty bland. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about meat, because besides, don't get seasick here, I'm going to turn you around again. You know, there's a lot of different ways to buy meat. You can buy canned meat like I just showed you here. You can also get dried meat. You can get dehydrated meals like prepper food, backpacking food. I didn't buy any for today's presentation because I just about choked. I was in the store and one meal, and it might have been enough for 4 people. I don't know. I didn't even look because the price on it was $10. But it's an option. And I know you can get it cheaper than that. You might buy it online. You might find it on sale. And the nice thing about it is it's lightweight and it lasts a long time. And many times it's a complete meal. It's not just the meat. You can buy processed meats. You can buy things like hot dogs, kielbasa, jerky, sandwich meats, and those all last pretty well too. They'll last you at least a week without refrigeration. When I first came on the road, I was eating a lot of that sort of food, and I didn't want to stay there. It is pretty heavily processed. It's got a lot of things in it that I'd rather not be eating. So I've tried to stay away from it. I do go more to canned foods. You can also go pre-cooked, and I do this quite often, probably once a month. I will get a pre-cooked rotisserie chicken. Almost all the stores have them near the deli. And I don't know if this is something everybody could do, but I keep it for 24 hours. And I eat as much of that as I want. I usually will go shopping in the morning, so I'll have some for lunch, I'll have some for dinner, I'll have some for breakfast, and I'll have some for lunch again. And if I want any snacks in between, I'll eat that as well. So it's a little excessive, but it allows me to have chicken that's already cooked, so I'm not using my own fuel. And it's a nice change for me. You can do smoked packaged fish, and I'm going to show you this. This is really, really yummy. And it comes in different brands. This is the one that the store had that I was at yesterday. It's expensive, but it's pure protein. And in this case, it's salmon. So I do buy it. I probably will have, even though this is only 7 ounces, it'll probably be 2 to 3 meals for me. Not alone, but that would be the protein meal, part of my meal. You have to like fish, and you have to like something that's smoked, but and that it fits into your budget, but it's certainly a nice treat. Another thing that I like, coming up from Wisconsin with Polish heritage, is pickled herring. So I like pickled fish. And this is usually in a refrigerator section of the grocery store. I don't worry about it. Now, I might keep this on my shelf like this because it's cool. I'm in the maybe low 70s at the most around where I'm at right now. And I'll keep this for at least a week. Once I open it, though, I have to say I will finish it up in about 24, a day and a half, maybe 2 days, and it'll be gone. But again, it's not for everybody. You can either get it in the sour cream like this is, or you can get it in vinegar. You know, another thing I've been wanting to try is kimchi. I haven't found it yet, but I will be looking for that. And you might want to consider kimchi too. It's another way of eating pickled vegetables. Now, let's get around to the fresh meat routine. What do we do about fresh meat? I do the same thing that I've talked about. When I go to the store, like when I get a rotisserie chicken and I eat it within 24 hours, I will go and get fresh meat. And in this case, I got pork chops. Sometimes I'll get hamburger. Sometimes I'll get, let's see, what else would I get? No, that's about it, I think. But in this case, I got pork chops, okay? Now, smells good, and it's still very cold to the touch. It's like refrigerator cold to the touch. And I'm going to tell you why. One of the things that I learned when I was doing prep for this class, and it's also something that Sue-Ann Carlson does, the executive director of HOWA, when she is in her Prius, she will do her purchases and she will keep her food in an insulated bag and put it in the coldest place of her rig, which in her case was on the floorboard in front of the passenger seat, and then cover it with a blanket or towel, or even a wet towel, in order to have that evaporative cooling going on. So what I did yesterday is I went and got an insulated bag. You see, it's actually a backpack. It's fairly thin, and it's going to fit nicely on the floor and not be obtrusive in front of my driver's passenger seat. But I found out one other idea when I was at the store yesterday, and I'm in there and I'm thinking, well, I could get fresh meat, and then, oh, wait a second, maybe I should go get some frozen meat, and I can put it in that cooling bag, that insulated bag. And yeah, but I don't want to wait 3 days for it to thaw out in the insulated bag before I eat it. So I did buy this fresh meat. And I also went, oh, look, my dog is right here saying, ooh, I can smell meat. So I happened to buy this because it was on sale, but I would have just bought a hamburger perhaps. But in this case, oh boy, he thinks this is for him. He is all about it. So I got some hamburgers, okay? And these happen to be bacon and cheddar cheese. Sounds yummy, huh? And they were frozen solid. So I got to my car. I kept them in a double plastic bag. I put them in the insulated bag, and then I put this fresh meat right next to it, which is why my fresh meat is so cold. So now I believe I'm going to have not only pork chops for the next 24 hours, but then after that, so that would be the next 24 hours, will be until Sunday, about noon. And then from Sunday till Monday, I can have hamburgers. Hi, Alicia.
Excuse me, Phyllis. Sorry to interrupt, Phyllis, but you have 5 minutes left for your presentation, and the chat is now open for questions from attendees.
Wonderful. Thank you. Perfect timing. Please, please, please give me questions so that I have lots of things to answer and talk about when I'm done talking about giving the presentation. So this is a perfect point for me to end up with oh, do you see the dog's tail? Come here. He's all about the meat. He's saying, oh, yum, yum. So in conclusion, this works for me. And it works for me because I travel with the weather, and that is critical. If you're someone that likes to be in 80-degree weather, you would have to adapt what I've talked about here today to handle that weather. And it might mean that you need to, the food that has to be eaten right away is not going to last 24 hours. Maybe it's only going to last 12 hours. You're going to have to experiment and figure it out. So much of what you see about what I'm showing you today is what I've learned on the road. So you have to be willing, let's see, let me look at my notes here. I'm saying this worked for me because I'm willing to do what I know works for me. It's not what the guidelines tell me. It's not like I believe sell-by dates, and it's not generally accepted practices. I listen to sell-by dates when it makes sense to me, when we're talking bakery products or we're talking other things. But when it comes to sell-by date on a can of soup, I don't think so. I think that, when the end comes, that can of soup is probably still going to be good. So I don't worry about that. And it works for me because I realize that when I go to buy foods that are going to last me, that are going to be eaten first, that I don't want to end up with this huge buffet that I could never possibly eat before it goes bad. So keep that in mind when you go in there, because I go to the store every 2 or 3 weeks, and if I go and it's the third week and I'm thinking, oh, I really want some salads, and if I get salads that are going to last me 2 weeks, that's too much. But because I'm so hungry for salads, I buy a bunch of salads. You got to be careful of that kind of stuff. So there I am. I'm ready and willing to answer any questions that I'm able, and I really appreciate you listening to me today. I like talking about this. Thank you very much. Alicia? Hi.
Phyllis, thank you for such a beautiful presentation. That was really thorough. Okay, so we'll go to our first question. Please send all your questions to Phyllis on the topic of No Fridge Nomad. We will take your questions in the order that we receive them. And I just want to give you a quick little instruction as how to send your question in. If you are on a computer, your controls are at the bottom of your computer. Click on that, find the chat feature, type your message, and press enter. And if you're on any device, whether it's iOS or Android, you have a 3-button feature. When you tap on your screen, find the chat, type your message to all panelists, and send that. Thank you. Our first question comes to us from Bonnie, and she says, Phyllis, how do you keep butter?
I didn't talk about butter on purpose. I was hoping it would be a question. Thank you, Bonnie. Butter is simple. When I first came out on the road and decided I was doing it without refrigeration, I buy butter in a tub. And I do like real butter, so I go with Challenge or Land O'Lakes, and don't give me reduced fat or anything like that. But I get it in a tub. Now, the last time I was someplace and I couldn't get it in a tub. So I bought the block of butter. Oh, that was a mistake. I ended up in weather that was over 80 degrees. And it was so funny when I opened up the container, you could see all the little wrappers in there just just perky and ready to go until you opened one up and you found out it had melted down to like half. And the rest of it was in my drawer. So I quickly put them into a dish and kept them that way, but I won't buy butter like that again. I'll always buy it in a tub, and I do not refrigerate it. It's fine.
Wonderful. So Jan says, thank you so much, info. And Rose is saying hi to you. You're getting compliments. Kathy says, hi there. Thank you for all the tips. I'm thinking you could add some frozen peas and corn to your backpack, and they will keep things cold and extend your veggies too.
Good idea. Good idea. Although I have limited space, it's small. It's quite small. So we'll see how much I can get in there and follow KC's lead, because KC said that she gets quite a few things into her tiny little fridge. So I might be able to manage it in my cooler too.
Okay, and Margaret has a question for you. She said, how do you deal with the fishy smell in your van? I love sardines and kippers, but until I get to a dump trash, it stinks the place up.
Different question entirely. That's about trash storage. We'll do another class on trash. No, but it is about trash storage. And so I have to tell you what I do is I would wrap it up in a plastic bag, and I have a 6-gallon metal trash can. And when I'm traveling, of course, it's in my rig, but as soon as I get someplace, I put it out by my rear wheel. It really blocks the odor tremendously, and that's the way I would manage it. Even like the chicken carcass. What am I going to do with the chicken carcass for 2 weeks or 3 weeks before I get to a trash place? Same thing, goes into the trash can.
Wonderful. Rose says, this is awesome. I won't be having a fridge while camping. Will half and half hold up?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Part of it?
Will half and half hold up?
Oh, good question. I would be a little, liquid milk that's not been put into a Steripack is a whole nother animal. Now, boy, maybe other people in the chat can offer suggestions on that. I don't know if you can get it in that way. I know you could get condensed sweetened milk, or evaporated milk. Don't know about half and half. My first guess would be no. But okay. Other people in the chat, if you know the answer to that, please speak up.
And Lidna says, cute dog, great presentation. Surprised at the mayor though. Thanks. Good. Melissa says, how much do you usually spend on groceries for yourself every 2 to 3 weeks?
Yesterday, I spent about $200. And this food will easily last me 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah. And then I'll still even have a little bit of other foods left over that will carry me over. Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Sue says, great information. How do you manage sodium intake with so much processed food?
I don't. And that's one of the things to consider, because it's really, if you've got an issue with salt, then you would really need to consider how you're doing this. And I know you can buy low sodium soups, you can buy low sodium items. I don't go with artificial sweeteners. I don't really worry about salt. Perhaps I should. Haven't gotten there yet. Sorry.
And Deidre says, thank you. I'm so sorry I arrived a bit late, but how often do you find you're going to the store?
About every 2 to 3 weeks.
Wonderful. And Jeff says, how long does eggs last?
I have had eggs easily last 3 weeks. I don't know if they'll last longer because I've eaten them by then.
Okay. So Gerard says, I'm also a no fridge nomad, and this was really great. How long do you keep your eggs for?
Hi, Gerard. I think you know now.
Okay. So thank you, Phyllis. Coming from Lisa, really great talk. I've also found shelf-stable natural milk in the carton, unrefrigerated in the store. last longer. Thank you for reminding me to plan.
Right. And a lot of people will prefer plant-based milk, like almond milk or soy milk too. And that again is also something that comes. Now, I don't know if you have to refrigerate it once you open it, if you get the larger containers. Alicia, do you use that kind of milk?
I do use milk, but almond milk.
And once it's open, what do you do?
Well, mine is used up quickly because I have two girls, so mine doesn't last but past a few days, and I only use it the very first few days of purchasing it.
Good
But
to know.
almond milk can go a little longer because it's a nut.
Good to know.
Right. Okay. Laurie says, great info. Thank you. Do you stand your asparagus in a little water to keep it longer?
When I'm at home, I do. And when I'm in a sticks and bricks is what I mean to say, before I came out on the road. I haven't done that out here, and I don't know why. I might give that a try and see if it makes a difference. Thank you for reminding me about that.
And Sandy says, great tips, Phyllis. Please discuss how you practice extracting the food products from packaging while avoiding contamination.
Ah, good point. I know that's particularly an issue with meat. They say there used to be a point where they said, wash your chicken thoroughly because you want to make sure that before you cook it, you wash off any juices with bacteria in it. And then there are others that say, don't wash your chicken, you're spreading the bacteria around. It'll be gone when you bake it, that sort of thing. But as you see now, when I have these pork chops, and I have 4 pork chops in there, I cook them all at once. So it's not like I'm touching one and leaving the rest in the packaging. All of that goes into the pan right away and gets cooked. The same thing for those hamburgers. I'll cook those. And so I'll cook them. I'll cook them within 24 hours of bringing them home. And then I'll eat them after they're cooked within 12 to 18 hours after they've been cooked. So you see, that pushes the timeline out quite a ways, doesn't it? Other things like the jam, you know, I should not be putting a spoon into it to bring the food out. A clean spoon is one thing, but if I can tip it out, just like the mayonnaise, if you can squeeze it out, you're less likely to be doing that cross-contamination. And if you've noticed that the foods I've got pretty much are sort of like single meal kind of things. So it's not like I'm dipping into it and then letting it sit for 12 or 24 hours and then dipping it into again, except for my jam. Okay, I hope that answered your question.
You have many more thank yous coming on down. I'm trying to find a question because there's so many compliments and other recommendations. Sandy says, really enjoyed this webinar. I think the cooler bag helps for those marginal circumstances. Would love to see another webinar on chasing the good weather. So great class, Phyllis. Thank you. It is so valuable to see all types of living on the road. Thank you for this class, since so many people live without solar. Which vegetables can live the longest without refrigeration?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. You know, I was thinking about that this morning, so I could try and lump it together for you. The root vegetables are really the way to go. So for instance, carrots or onions or potatoes, sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are awesome on the road. One of the things, you're gonna laugh, but one of the things I was really worried about was not being able to have sweet potatoes once I came out on the road. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do without my beloved sweet potatoes? Well, Sue-Ann taught me that I can peel them, dice them, put them in a frying pan with butter, and then when they're almost done, add a chopped up apple. Oh my goodness, I am thrilled to death. Instead of having my potatoes microwaved or in the oven, that's my go-to for that. Other kinds of vegetables, when you start thinking about tomatoes do well. Again, you've got to watch them, and depending on your weather and how fresh they were when you brought them back from the store, you'll have to think about how long, and watch them, how long they're going to last for you. I've bought some cherry tomatoes, which I don't usually get tomatoes, but I do have cherry tomatoes this time, and I suspect in the weather I'm in, they're going to last me a week. Let's see, other hard kind of vegetables. Of course, I showed you the asparagus and the Brussels sprouts. Cabbage is a great vegetable. It will last a long, long time. And it can be eaten raw, or it can be steamed or cooked or put on top of tortillas and tacos, and it makes instead of using lettuce, using cabbage. Trying to think of other veggies. Alicia, can you think of other veggies I should talk about?
Well, you've pretty much covered it comprehensively. Yeah, doing that. But
go ahead.
We have one from Sue. She has a great idea. She says bacon jerky saves well without refrigeration, and it is tasty additive to many foods for flavor.
That's exactly true. I know, for instance, another wonderful recipe I was shown was just making scrambled eggs and throwing spinach in it and a little bit of jerky. And jerky isn't always like the big sheets of meat that kind of shred this way. I bought a package of jerky one time that was almost basically shredded and quite tender, and that would have been wonderful to put into eggs.
Okay, just to let you know, Phyllis, you have a few people giving their recommendations. I'm just trying to find your questions for you.
Oh, the recommendations are good too.
Okay. And Shannon says, I'm so sorry that I arrived late, and I'm certain the question has already been answered. Would you be able to briefly tell me how long you can store cooked meats and how you store it?
Okay, I'm going to fess up. So about 10 years ago, I was living overseas in Armenia and living with a family. And the family did have a refrigerator, but they used it for hardly anything, almost. And so I'm getting a lot of my skills that I'm using now by what I learned from them. So they would cook, for instance, some meat or beef stew or something in the evening, and they left it in the pot with a lid on it on the stove, no heat, just sitting there cooling all night long. Now, their breakfast then consisted of that food, that same stew for breakfast. So now you've got to figure that that's at least 12 or 14 hours that it sat on the stove, unrefrigerated, with a lid on it. And that's pretty much what I do too. So if you open up a can of beef stew, that's a can of beef stew and it's gone. I eat it all. Might have it for lunch and dinner, but it just stays in the pot and I might warm it up again. If I'm going to cook these pork chops, they're going to be sitting in my frying pan, and they will sit in my frying pan from lunch when I cook it till dinner when I eat the rest of it, or maybe even on into breakfast. So we're talking definitely more than 12 hours sitting out without refrigeration. Never leaves the frying pan until I eat it. Don't know that that's something everybody could do. I have the constitution that I can do that. I don't believe that it's spoiled in any way. I believe it's still, of course, it looks the same. It has the same texture. It smells the same. And I experimented and I didn't get sick. So that's what I do.
Okay, Alma says, a Nomad showed me how to put all fresh foods in Ziploc bags and place the bags inside his cooler that is filled halfway with water, which keeps the foods cool even in hot temperatures. And Joanne says, where do you keep your cooked meats till you eat it all?
Well, I think I covered that.
Yes. And Alma is thanking you for the class. She said, thank you, Phyllis, for a great class.
Great. Glad you enjoyed it.
So, okay. It sounds like the storage works well when closer to floor. Such good info. Lots of recommendations coming up, Phyllis.
Oh, good. Because I'm sure that we all have something to learn from them. If you want to share, please.
Okay. And in the meantime, please submit any questions that you may have along with those suggestions. Okay. Amira says, I simmer the roasted chicken carcass for bone broth. Serve with rice.
Nice. Nice.
Another suggestion here, putting hot foods into a mason jar will create a vacuum seal as it cools. It will keep it up to 72 hours, Laura says.
Wow, what good news. What good information. But that means I have to be willing to travel with glass, right? I don't know if I can trust myself traveling with glass. Good suggestion, though.
Jim says, thank you so much for all the information. And Robin says, thank you for such wonderful class. So many beautiful compliments for you, Phyllis.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You know, we get very nervous when we're up here talking. And so it's really nice to get good feedback. Thank you.
And Mary says, I do what the American cook does. It is simpler. I always reheat before eating to kill bacteria buildup between meals.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear I've got a fellow person who practices it like I do. Thank you. It's good to hear that.
Okay, Melissa submitted a question. Thank you, Melissa. Have you used prepackaged spinach? How long do you think it might last?
I'm thinking prepackaged fresh. And yes, if that's what you're talking about. And spinach is delicate. It seems to go possibly, you know, I might be able to keep it 3 days and then it starts wilting. Once it starts really getting wilty, I don't like to keep it because you have to pick through it and it feels like the flavor has been contaminated. So I'm not a real big one on keeping spinach once it starts to wilt. And you know, it seems like as it's been about 3 days is what I'm remembering. Do you use spinach, Alicia?
I do use spinach, but I use it in my smoothies. And I try to use those up in the first few days of purchase.
Same thing, yeah. That spinach is pretty delicate. It's sort of like leaf lettuce too. Leaf lettuce basically is, and I guess that's one reason the prepackaged salads are good because they do have cabbage and other of the, you know, the heart of kale and other kinds of leafy greens that are stiffer. And if they're stiffer, they seem to do better.
Right. Dee says, great presentation, Phyllis. And Amira is trying to correct me. Sorry for the mispronunciation. Amira says she meant Armenian. She said Armenian way of cooking, not American. I'm so sorry.
Amira, are you Armenian? How about that? Oh my gosh. Is that answer someplace, Amira, in the chat that if you are or not? And
okay,
go ahead.
Sorry, a few people have been asking about the chat, Phyllis, so I just want to clarify this. You're able to send your questions and it's only to all panelists. You're not able to chat as of yet with other attendees. That will happen at the top of the hour. So a few of those have come in to say they cannot see chatting to attendees. You will not be able to do that. You can only send questions to the panelists. Okay. And Rose asked, how long cook veggies last?
Well, I usually only cook what I know I can eat. And I guess I have cooked them, Brussels sprouts or asparagus with mushrooms in butter with a little soy. I've probably have cooked them for dinner and maybe then eaten them for breakfast. But again, as was suggested, I will warm them up and eat them that way. By the way, when I cook things like that, I found that if I put garlic in too early in the cooking process, it ends up making my pan get sticky. So I have a tendency to put my garlic, which I love in my food, towards the end now so that it doesn't make so much of a sticky mess in the pan.
Wonderful. And Kathy says, frozen spinach could take over once the fresh is gone. I love the combined frozen spinach with frozen mixed vegetables or frozen peas and corn.
You know, that might be a really good way to go. So for instance, next time when I go shopping, instead of buying frozen another package of meat, so I have a package of fresh meat, and instead of buying another package of frozen meat, maybe getting some other frozen vegetables and seeing how that works. That's a good suggestion.
Ginny would like to know, where in your rig do you keep your food?
Oh, I keep it everywhere. I have some shelving above my, you know, you can see up here, I have shelving closer to the front of my rig. I've got most of my food stored up there. But then I just recently built a storage box for between my driver's seat and my passenger seat. And I have overflow, especially when you just get back from the grocery store, where do you put everything? So now I've got an extra bin there that I'm able to keep food in there as well, particularly the canned goods, the heavier things. Then I do have, let's see, I guess I've got 5 drawers. And I'll have one drawer that's for coffee, one drawer for some dishes, one drawer for things. Oh, I want to show you this. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but here, this is baby food, toddler food, and they're usually only about 60 calories or so, but you see it's fruit, it's pear, spinach, and pea. There's all different kinds of combinations, and these were on sale for $1 a pack. Not the cheapest snack you can get, but when I'm driving, oh my gosh, when I'm going and I don't want to stop, this is wonderful because I can eat it while I'm driving, and it gives me a boost. Quite nice, and I feel like I'm, this one happens to even be organic, so that's pretty cool. So I do have some drawers that are under my countertop, and I'll keep my potatoes in there, and carrots and onions, that sort of thing, my apples, that sort of thing.
Wonderful. Joanne says, thank you so much, Phyllis. Lots of useful information. I will incorporate most of this into my life.
Good.
Amira says, eggs last unfridged about 3 weeks for her.
Okay. But I've never thrown an egg out unless it was cracked, so I don't really know how long they would last. And we'll have to do an experiment and I'll put a date on one and keep it for, maybe, and we'll have another meeting next year and I'll tell you if it lasted. Maybe I'd have to keep a dozen of them though, and I'll put a date on them, and then I'll check them after 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and see. That might be the way to do it.
And Alma says, I like adding canned spinach to the pot, but thanks for the tip about using frozen spinach. Shannon says, how do you keep mice out of your food?
I don't invite them to dinner. I have been one of the lucky ones. I have not had mice in my rig at all. Now, Alicia, on the other hand, has an open door policy.
Can't seem to get rid of them, Phyllis.
Do you have them again? No.
Not again. I think they just didn't leave to begin with.
Oh, no.
It's a colony of them.
I'm sorry to hear that. I've been very fortunate, and I'm not sure why. I think that there's something to the fact that they will be where there's water, that you're more likely, if you're camping along a river or along a lake. For some reason, I've got that in my head. It must have to do with the rats that are along the wharf or something. I just associate that. And I have not really been camping along any water. So is that it? I don't know.
Okay, Laura says, thanks for the informative presentation. I am a big cheese eater, also buying in small quantities on the road. And Rose is laughing at your joke there. He says, on the Brussels sprouts asparagus recipe, could you please repeat?
Oh, sure.
On the Brussels sprouts.
Yeah. Okay. You pull out the bottom leaves, out the outer leaves. You chop off the bottom a little bit. I have a tendency to cut them in half, sometimes even in quarters if they're very large, and put quite a bit of butter in a frying pan, drop them in there, cover them up, and start letting them very slowly cook. I like it when they get a little bit browned, and that's wonderful. I'll throw the mushrooms in when they're about half done so that the mushrooms get done too. And I particularly like to splash a little bit of soy sauce on them. So I've heard of some people that'll actually make a peanut sauce on it and put a peanut sauce on it. Wow, that sounds delicious too.
Okay. Heather says, if eggs are fresh, not from the store, unwashed eggs can last 6 weeks on the counter. I raised chicken for 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that would be wonderful if you've got a what do they call them when they sell drugs? They're a dealer. If you have a dealer, if you've got an egg dealer, that's the way to go. Obviously, yeah.
Wonderful. And Amira says, I check eggs after I get home. The cracked ones get hard boiled same day
Yeah.
if they smell okay. Never got sick from spoiled food.
Yeah. I have never been sick from spoiled food either. And
Shannon had what? Okay.
I was just wondering, I don't know if that has to do with our Constitution or if, because some people might not be able to get away with it, but I certainly have been. And apparently Amira as well.
Okay, Shannon says, do you store your potatoes and onions open in drawers? Or
Yes.
do you use sealed Rubbermaid containers? Or
No, not for potatoes. Definitely, you want to have your potatoes breathing. So they just lay in a drawer. Now, you saw the bag of potatoes I've got. It comes in kind of like a bag with holes in it, and I just leave them in the bag, but they're just laying in a drawer.
Okay, Phyllis, I just wanted you to know that you have 5 additional minutes to continue with answering questions. So if you have more questions for Phyllis on the topic of No Fridge Nomad, please submit those now. Okay. And Anna says, does having a dog help keep mice away? It's unrelated.
Well, I don't think so, because I've only had this little guy that's with me for a couple of months now. And he is a scrounger. He'll eat just about anything, but I've never seen him hunt. So I don't think the mice would be too worried about him.
Okay. And Laurie's also speaking about mice, so we'll just move on to Margaret. Good job. I am learning a lot. Unwashed eggs from the farmer's market last a month or more.
Wonderful.
In fact, any veggies from organic farmer's market last longer than store-bought and are often cheaper too. Hard cheese like Parmesan lasts longer too.
Sure. Oh, I bet you're right about them lasting longer from the farmer's market, because they're relatively fresh, probably fresher than when they get to the store. So you've got that extra time. That shipping time has been cut out of the formula.
Kathy says, one last comment for the frozen veggies. You don't have to wait for them to thaw. They will cook very quickly if you add them to a hot pot or pan.
Yeah.
Don't forget frozen broccoli.
Good plan. But again, you've got to, if you buy it and you get it home from the store, you've got to figure that within 2 days it's going to be thawed. And I think in my estimation, frozen vegetables will thaw quicker than frozen meat. So that you need to keep that in mind as you're thinking about how you're storing it.
Wonderful. So Drew says, so much good information. Really enjoy your presentation. Thanks, Phyllis.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here today, all of you.
Any more questions, guys, for Phyllis, please submit them. And since we don't have a question right now, Karen went off topic and she says, can you show us your dog?
He's sleeping, and I don't think you want me to interrupt him.
Okay, Dee has one here. For food storage, rice, oatmeal, open packages, keep I will not pronounce this correctly, I'm sorry. Diatomaceous earth. Food grade, put a small amount in food. Okay, I'm getting a little mixed up here. Put a small amount in food. Keep bugs out. Also, you can use a small paintbrush to paint light dusting in the area where food is stored. Great way to protect food from mice and bugs.
Very good. And if I did have a mouse problem, of course, I would do everything I could to get rid of them. But it probably would change how I'm storing my food, because right now I've got a banquet available to any mouse that walks in. They could easily, go to all of my food, pretty much, at least half of my food, and nibble on it. And then I would get really kind of squeamish about it, because I don't know what they've been carrying, what's in their saliva. So luckily I haven't had that as an issue.
Tina says, thank you. And Robin says, the half and half question. Use single serve light gas station coffee bar.
Good idea. You know, and I do that on occasion. I forgot about that. As a treat for myself, I will buy, they're called moo I think. And you can buy them where the condensed milk is usually, or that sort of food. And you'll get a box of them, and there'll be maybe 24 in there. And they're little tiny little plastic cups that have got a foil lid on them, and you rip it back. And yeah, that's one option. I don't think it's as good as, it is half and half, but it doesn't somehow or another seem as rich as the half and half you get in a box.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Phyllis, for a comprehensive presentation about living without a fridge as a nomad. Thank you all so very much for your attendance to HOWA's Virtual Caravan class. Do enjoy your weekend. Thank you. Any last words, Phyllis?
Okay. Thank you very much for being here today.